You found yourself a hunter.
Are you that outsider?
I don't reckon you're from round here.
Don't think too hard about all of this. Whatever happens, you may think it all a mere bad dream.
Yarnum's done for.
Well, if you hadn't got off your arse, you wouldn't be in this mess.
The hours of the night are many, and the beasts more than I can count.
Have you seen enough of these wretched beasts? Freakish slugs and no doctors.
You're nigh on a beast of the field, but here you are, treading a measure with the gods.
My personal favorite FromSoft game is Bloodborne. In short, it's because of the movement, the more aggressive combat, the weapons, and while that might not be a lot, it absolutely carried me through the experience the first time. This year was my third time going through it since getting the Platinum Trophy, and I find myself disliking a lot of things that the game does. And while they don't ruin the experience for the most part, I feel like we still need to talk about them. So, our story begins here, in Central Yharnam. This is an amazing start. Just look at it. You got this huge area that you traverse with so many nooks and crannies that all feel distinct from one another. You can even talk to some of the townsfolk, although only through a door. And while the majority of the enemies are regular guys, make no mistake about it, this place is meant to kick you in the butt. I probably spent 4 to 5 hours on this opening level during my first visit. It's absolutely ruthless. The reasons being that you're not going to be familiar with how the game functions. Like how your weapon has 2 forms, which changes their attack patterns. When I realized this with my hunter's axe, which gave it a longer reach, I immediately started to progress. You can also utilize your gun for visceral attacks and your R2, which is your heavy attack. So you might have survived the center, but now you get to the 2 wolves. This is pretty much your last obstacle before you unlock the shortcut. One wolf is plenty powerful at this stage, but what makes it even more difficult is that they're so close to each other that you'll probably attract both of them at the same time. I love this area. I do. But when you're looking at what the game's gonna throw at you from this point on, everything feels so much easier compared to your first time here. Seriously, I think the only area that matches it is the first area in the DLC. What makes that even more puzzling is that this is the very beginning. This is when you're supposed to pull in people. Instead, it's just a punishing experience. And yes, I understand that this is very much establishes the hostile world of Bloodborne, but once again, for the rest of the game, few areas live up to the same brutality. Anyway, before we get any further, we can take a little detour to the Great Bridge. Here we have our first boss fight. I would say there are 3 different types of bosses in Bloodborne. The first one being Beast type, second being Hunter type, and the third one Gimmick. This is the first category, a really straightforward one. You can't really call it a tutorial boss because it doesn't really teach you anything. It's more of a sample of what's to come. If you manage to hit its head, you can poise break the bastard, but that's it. In most games, hitting the head is the weak spot anyway, and it's pretty common in Fromsoft games as well. Can we talk about something annoying? Lamps. You can only use them to return to the hunter's dream. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's so many times when the only thing you want to do is teleport to another area. Nope, first the hunter's dream, you get a loading screen, run to the exact gravestone, loading screen, and there we go.
Welcome home, good hunter.
You know what?
What is it
I don't
you
mind coming
desire?
back here. So after going through some more places in the city, unlocking shortcuts, we arrive at the first proper boss. Father Gascoigne is a hunter type boss fight. What that means is that he moves like the player character. Many people consider him to be a tutorial boss. That's because he teaches you that running away and being passive will only result in you getting hit. What you're meant to do is constantly look for opportunities to punish, meaning that your quick step ability should be used to step towards the enemy rather than away from them. Quickstep is one of the best things that Bloodborne has. It's faster than a roll, but naturally has less iframes. In fact, the way you use it is less about invisibility frames and more about avoiding the attack completely. Not to mention, because it's faster to execute, you can do a lot more course correction compared to FromSoft games where rolling is the main way to avoid damage. You can also experience firsthand how effective using the gun is, if you time it right. Gascoigne in general is just a good fight. It has 3 phases and there's no cutscenes to break up the flow of the battle. You're under constant pressure and nothing's gonna give you a break until you win the fight itself. Oh, and you can use a music box to stun him for a couple of seconds. It's a quest item and I would say quite useful for your first time fighting him. Right, now let's talk about why I don't like Father Gascoigne. It's not so much about him, rather it's the fact that after overcoming him, there's only a few bosses in the entire game that actually pose any kind of challenge. And sure, this could be a subjective point to make, but we don't have any other hunter type fight in the base game other than at the very end. This means that one of the best boss fights happened this early in the game, and then we kind of stagnate. Not to say that there's no good boss fights left, but nothing quite reaches Gascoigne's level. Again, at least in the base game. Our next location is the Cathedral Ward. There's multiple places we can go. Some of them are only for loot, others lead to new areas. If we take the road straight ahead, we'll run into a gate that we can open by buying an item, just like in Dark Souls 1, or we can bypass that going around and eventually opening it from the other side. First we'll head to Old Yarnum, where we are greeted by ponies and puppies.
You there! Hunter! Didn't you see the warning? Turn back at once. Old Yarnum, burned and abandoned by men, is now home only to beasts. They are of no harm to those above. Turn back, or the hunter will face the hunt.
I love this area. You can tell that there's a history to this place, and it's a nice change of pace by introducing another element that you have to watch out for. That being the madman with the machine gun. And yes, he's only shooting at you, and yes, there is a reason. If that wasn't enough, we fight our first regular hunter here. These bastards are usually tough, they have a lot of health, and they're constantly firing their guns. Meaning that if they catch you while you're mid-attacking, you're dead. One hit, it's over. The guy shooting at us is even worse. This guy's so strong for this early. If you don't patch up your game, you can shoot him down or lure him away by climbing back down, causing him to fall to his death, but you can't do that anymore. I mean, you can still push him down, but it's much harder. He drops his armor set and his gun, I think. A little further down the road, we get to a city primarily inhabited by wolves. Spooky. They feel much easier than they did on the first level. The boss of this area is the Blood-Starved Beast. Fun fact, I died to this guy the most on my first playthrough. And it's only because of one move. It's his lunge attack that back in the day felt really fast, and while it doesn't do enough damage to kill you, being near the boss poisons you, which means that you're actively losing health. Combine the two together and I'm gone. Nowadays, I don't even get hit. Here's a couple of wind-up attacks that could feel a little disorienting while learning him, but otherwise it's a pretty simple fight.
Hunters have told me about the church, about the gods and their love. But do the gods love their creations? I am a doll created by you humans. Would you ever think to love me? Of course. I do love you. Isn't that how you've made me?
Before we proceed, I'll make sure to talk to Elise because hers is the only quest line I managed to finish in this playthrough.
And tonight of all nights.
Right, that would have to wait for now. Let's go to the cathedral. Did you see that? They set up a boss in a minute. The human tragedy element, the clinging to fate that we see fail in real time, it's masterful. Wish I could say the same for the fight itself. She feels intimidating and she has long-reaching attacks, but not much in actual attacks. She just sweeps and bashes. She does have a grab attack and that's pretty much it. She has one more trick that she didn't use in this playthrough, which is where she heals herself. You can stop this with a consumable item, but even if you don't, it doesn't really matter. Which kinda shows why these abilities for bosses don't really work. If they give bosses a move which you absolutely need to stop with some kind of item, how do you make sure that players are aware of that before the fight? And if you make them aware, what's the point? Everybody's just gonna buy the item and that's it. There's no challenge in that. They should have made her have more moves that helps with her lack of mobility. It's quite easy to just stay at her side or even her back and just wail on her. Presentation wise, great, but the actual fight, pretty lackluster. After we win, we get this cutscene that presents two key characters in the lore.
Master Willem, I've come to bid you farewell.
Oh, I know. You think now to betray me.
No, but you will never listen. I tell you, I will not forget our adage.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood. By the gods, fear it, Lawrence.
And no, I'm not going to go into the lore. This is pretty strictly gameplay focused video, but I want you to be aware of certain people because they're gonna pop up as we play along. We're heading to Hembek's Charnel Lane. There's not much here that we haven't seen before. We have these mad villagers, something that they reused in Elden Ring. You can also see these executioner guys. You can actually meet one of them all the way back in central Yharnam. I usually come here to farm blood vials. They drop them and also give plenty of blood echoes. Which reminds me, even with all the knowledge I have of this game, I still needed to farm healing items. It's not the most horrible thing, but it definitely showcases that flasks are the superior healing item. Not only because they refill at the bonfires, but because by limiting how many you can have, you can control the amount of mistakes a player can make. And let's not get into how kindling ruins that aspect. Anyway, the Witch of Hembek is our boss for this area. Scratch that, it's nobody. No, it is actually the witch. I mean, which is. There's two of them. Oh, what a twist. They just walk around, they have a spell, a grab attack that they hardly use, and there's a bunch of regular enemies that spawn in the meantime. I never bother with the regular enemies, which end up biting me in the ass as I get grabbed and mauled by the very end. Second time around I still don't care, but the difference is that this time I managed to win. Time to go help out Elise. You have to go back to Gascoigne's arena. As far as I know, you can't teleport there. You have to walk. You have to defeat this Henrik guy who also gone mad, but watch out, don't hit Elise too many times because she's gonna turn hostile. That is the hardest part in this. I end up dying, but Elise finishes the job.
That wasn't necessary of you, but you have my thanks. We made it with our lives. You're not bad at all. You must have killed Gascoigne as well, then. He was falling apart, I'm sure it had to be done. But try to keep your hands clean. A hunter should hunt beasts.
Probably unbeknownst to us, we got the passport for one of the areas that we couldn't access before. We got it during the Lawrence cutscene. I hate this place, and it's because of one simple thing. Snakes. I am deadly afraid of snakes. Here's the formula. If a video game has a snake in it, it cannot be a 10 out of 10. It's over. One of the worst experiences that I had was with Far Cry 3. Yes, you had the jump scaring snakes, but even worse, one time I accidentally drove my vehicle down some kind of hole which was filled with snakes. I immediately threw my monitor out of the window. So when it comes to this area, I just run through, fuck this, goddamn snakes. You know who is the most famous snake? The devil. What more proof do you need? They are literally evil ropes. Once we venture through, we can have our roasted pig. And the next boss is 3 guys? I think it's a huge achievement that nobody is talking about how difficult it is to fight 3 guys at the same time. I've never seen anybody else fight them, so I can only talk about my experience. In this gameplay, I use my gun as much as possible. That's a very viable method because during your visceral attacks, you're immune to damage. However, back on my first time here, I actually utilized the pillar structure here to block out the projectile attacks and focus on the melee guys. It didn't take a lot of attempts for me to succeed. Which leaves us with this. This fight is more about somehow separating the guys or abusing the gun mechanic. Sure, at a certain point they start summoning giant snakes, a move that Mesmer stole, but it's nothing special. Even if you get hit, it probably won't kill you. And they do it so infrequently that it hardly matters. Still, it does test skills that many other bosses don't, so I definitely don't think it's a bad fight. Bergenworth. You can hear one of the NPCs talk about how everything started from here. It's certainly a letdown when you actually see the place, and it's just one building. We have these fly enemies and this weird looking dude. I love his design, but that's pretty much it. You open this gate and there's Master Willem, mute, pointing at the water. This is such a cool moment. You go ahead and take that plunge. Hope everybody figured this out, because otherwise it would ruin this. But maybe not as much as the boss itself. Now I always hated Rom as a boss fight because it's not much of a fight to begin with. You will struggle more with the million spiders rather than Rom, and do not be mistaken, the spiders can actually one-shot you. Lovely. But you know what? I don't think it's that bad. I think you should be thankful that you have to fight Rom here. You better pray to God that you never have to fight Rom in the Chalice dungeons. Holy shit. What makes it so much worse is the much smaller arena, which means that spiders have a much easier time hitting you, as well as Rom's magic. The Chalice dungeon version really put this into a different perspective for me. Anyway, after defeating Rom, we get this cutscene. Then we get teleported to here. Now you're able to see the amygdala, as they are called. They've been here all along, just hanging out. If you raise your insight, you can see and hear things that you couldn't before. It's a great mechanic for a video game, and so are the amygdala. Even if you try to interact with them, you can't. They're just constantly watching everything that's going on.
Good hunter, your presence somehow soothes. I sense the ancient echoes. They course your veins.
I think it's time we visit an optional area that everybody loves. Canehurst as a location is great, very aesthetic, but I find the inside of the castle to be a little uninspired when it comes to enemies. You get these ghost ladies and some hunched over ones. On the castle walls you have these gargoyle looking things. The blood-sucking enemies genuinely look disturbing, but they're only outside. But my biggest gripe with this whole place is the path to the boss. This is how you get to him. It's not that it's long, rather the unavoidable damage and the convoluted path you have to take, drop down, climb up ladders. It's a mess. And chances are you're gonna do this multiple times, as Logarius is not the easiest of bosses. For the first phase, it's pretty straightforward. He has some spells, but for the most part he's just swinging his weapon at you. Second phase is when things get more wild. He stabs his sword into the ground, which causes you to take damage anytime you're not behind cover. You can actually destroy this sword to stop it, and if you do, well, now the fight reverts back to how it was in the first phase. But a lot can go wrong on your way to destroy the sword, so you better watch out for the main guy. It's an okay fight, and by winning, we get the Crown of Illusions. Put it on immediately for a surprise.
I can't remember. Not a thing, only I feel a yearning, something I never felt before. What's happening to me? Tell me, Hunter. Could this be joy?
Maybe it's time we talk about the Chalice dungeons. You can completely ignore this aspect of the game and there's not going to be any consequences. After digging deeper and going through all the dungeons I had to for the platinum, I grew to hate them even more. The idea is that you get these randomly generated dungeons with random loot and enemies, but the reality is that it's not really randomly generated. The layout for any given type of dungeon is always the same. Loot is very bad, useless stuff, but the further down you go on the levels, there's 5 overall, you might be able to get weapons that you can only access later in the game. Plus blood echo and gem farming, but you'll be fine without doing that. The main problem with Chalice dungeons is that they are all the same. You run around the area until you find a lever, pull it, get to a disappointing boss, and move on to another level. There's usually 3 levels per dungeon. Even the most difficult ones, the Defiled Chalice dungeons where you only have 50% of your HP, is the same. But I would recommend to you to never do the Defiled Chalice dungeons. It features the hardest boss fights in the game, namely the Watchdog of the Old Gods and the Amygdala. Back in the Snake Woods, one guy gives you an item that tells you to get grabbed by this fella. I just realized that the guy who gave us the item is actually Patches. It's weird because getting to this place is absolutely necessary in order to progress with the main story. Yahar Ghul Unseen Village. This first section has nothing to offer. You fight the first enemies, only they're slightly stronger. It's not until we get to this spot where a new element is introduced. The laser attack that Midir will get in Dark Souls 3 and also Pseudosax in Elden Ring. I don't get why this Amygdala is doing this. It feels just like a gimmick. Then we get to this part. 3 hunters and there's no way to get only one's attention. This is where I realized why I usually don't play with short range weapons. Sure, the fast attack speed is great, but I have no way of dealing with multiple enemies. And this isn't the only time Bloodborne is gonna throw multiple guys at you. I don't actually know how to get to Darkbeast Barl the right way, so I always came from Yahar Ghul. I fought this guy 3 times in my life. He couldn't kill me a single time. I don't even know his moves. You can see that I'm getting hit left and right, but because you have 20 blood vials by default, I can easily out-heal the damage. And of course we can say that I meant to fight this guy earlier, but am I? He has plenty of health and I'm not doing that amazing of a damage to him. As per usual, when it comes to four-legged bosses that you can get underneath, that's your best spot to be. He has some kind of explosion attack, so watch out for that. Other than that, it should be smooth sailing. Back in Yahar'gul, we finally get a new type of enemy. They look terrifying. I love it. They hit like a truck though. Our next patient is the one reborn. What a miserable mess he is. This is a slightly modified Tower Knight from Demon Souls, and because of it, it has the same problems. While you're taking time off to kill the guys on the walls, the boss has one ranged attack, and that is gonna be pretty much blocked by the pillars, so you don't need to worry about it. Find it to be more acceptable in Demon Souls, but in Bloodborne, it kills the flow of combat, which is usually handled very well. In truth, I never kill the guys upstairs, I can't be bothered. It worked out for me the first 2 times. Other than an explosion that has a long wind up, but if it gets you, you die instantly, there's nothing that this boss can do besides take the abuse. We have to take another detour as there's another optional place. The Upper Cathedral Ward is a humble place. There's not much here besides going through this bridge, entering the building from the left side, and partying with the brain suckers. I hate the brain suckers. Their only purpose is to cast a spell that binds you, and then they go for their grab attack. Sure, sometimes they flail around, but they just want to grab, grab, grab. If that wasn't bad enough, the game throws you a curveball. In order to get the key that you need to progress through this area, you need to kill these 2 brain suckers specifically. And then the key just appears in your inventory. This is not a mechanic. We never had anything like this happen before. They could have put the key to be dropped randomly by one of the brain suckers, but no. They knew what they were doing. They wanted to force you to fight these guys. Of course, I forgot to mention that you have to fight them in narrow halls, and these last 2, you have to be careful because you can really easily get both of them to attack you at once. Thankfully, I can take my anger off on the next boss. The Celestial Emissary is a bunch of regular enemies, with one of them being the main boss. Of course, having so many enemies surround you, you can easily get overwhelmed, but generally it's a simple fight. FromSoft keeps trying to make these mob boss fights, yet they never work. We're not done yet, we need to break that window, another mechanic that is only used here. But it does hide one of the best boss fights in the game. Ebridas is what everybody expects from Bloodborne. A Lovecraftian tentacle monster, her design is a definite highlight. She has so many moves. Her charge attack is so hard to dodge. She has a Call Beyond spell, another thing FromSoft reuses in their games. Plus, it was only during this playthrough that I realized that she can cause the Frenzy status effect. The more you know. Obviously, your best bet is to hit her head, which means a longer weapon again will serve you better. There's yet another optional area, the Nightmare Frontier. If you play the game just doing the essentials, you can finish it in a single afternoon. The mountains stand out as they're really different from anything we've seen so far, not to mention the fact that it's not taking place at night. Nightmare Frontier indeed. Now that I'm sporting the Holy Blade, taking care of multiple hunters at once is much easier. We get some trolls throwing rocks at us with lingering hitboxes, just like in Demon Souls. This is the first time we can meet a Wintern Lantern. I call them the better designed brain suckers. They cause frenzy if you're near them, which if it fills up you take massive amounts of damage. They do have a grab attack, but because they don't have a million HP, you can kill them before they manage to do anything. So who's up in the mountains? An amygdala. I'm not a fan of this. I think they should have kept the amygdalas passive, just observing. Once you give me the ability to harm them, they become just another type of enemy. Be it, other than the chalice dungeons, you still can't hurt them, but it feels like this fight only exists because they couldn't come up with anything, so they just picked something that was already there. You know how to fight this guy, right? Hit the head, don't be too greedy. He has a second phase where he tears off his arms and now attacks you with them, but it's the same attack pretty much, except longer reach. Boring. We're getting close to the end when it comes to the main game, so I think it's time we step into the DLC. Let me tell you, playing Bloodborne without the DLC is a sin. The fact that you can still buy just the base game is a sin. So much of what makes Bloodborne great is in the DLC. Without it, it's like a streamer that doesn't solicit minors. It just feels incomplete. Our first area is the Cathedral Ward from the past. I love it. It feels familiar, but at the same time there's enough things changed that it feels new. You will fight a lot, and I mean a lot of hunters here. Mostly one at a time, but they're still pretty brutal. I would liken this place to Central Yarnum, as both are huge with tons to explore, bunch of new weapons, armors to collect, and I assume everybody knows who awaits us at the end of this area.
Please, help us. An unsightly beast. A great terror looms.
Yes, Ludwig is one of the best fights FromSoft has to offer. I absolutely agree. Still, it's not my favorite one. And it's only because of one thing, the second phase. The first phase is a beast-type fight, and it's the best one at that. His design is horrifying, his attacks are ruthless, and you mostly can't stay behind him, you have to take him head on. You have to face the terrifying beast. But then the second phase happens. I love the transition, the reveal of the Moonlight Greatsword, and much like the first phase, his attacks feel so satisfying to dodge, maybe even more so than the first phase. And yet, there's not much to the second phase. He swings his sword if you stay near him, but the only way you can get killed is if he does his AoE attack. I get that he's supposed to regain his humanity somewhat in this phase, but it doesn't change the fact that gameplay wise, it just becomes an easier fight. And that's not to say that the second phase is bad by any means, it's just that I enjoy the first phase so much more. His head is still around, so we can talk to him.
Are my church hunters the honorable Spartans? I hoped they would be. Oh my! Just as I feared. Then a beast-possessed degenerate was I, as my detractors made eminently clear.
We have to kill him either way if we want the sword. There's more hunters in the next section, and while they're tough, they're still nothing compared to those 3 assholes back in Yahar'gul. Our next stop is the clinic, where there's some freaky stuff going on.
Lady Maria, please, take my hand, please.
Blip, blop, blip, blop.
It's a disturbing place, but I feel like it's way too long with mostly the same enemies scattered throughout. It's a bunch of shortcut elevators and stairs, but if we make it through, we meet everybody's favorites. There was a time when I considered them to be not so bad. I mean, not good by any means, but passable. Their universe, magic summoning attack looked very epic, and the arena is nice with the sunflowers, but it's actually just the same fight as the Celestial Emissary if you think about it. It's worse because there's even more unpredictable things that could happen, like whether or not the spells are gonna hit you. They could have easily removed this and nobody would miss it, but we do get access to the clock tower.
Should be left well alone. Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will kill you now. Eliminate you from your wild curiosity.
Lady Maria is my favorite fight. It might even be across all of the FromSoft titles. And while she is difficult, she's not that hard. What I like about it is that there's constant pressure. If you fall out of the rhythm of the fight, you're probably dead. You have to stick close to her at all times, avoid getting shot while attacking, learn some of the trickier timings, and there's 3 phases of this. It might seem like a lot, but just like Gascoigne, the transitions happen in real time. Plus, each phase only adds a little bit of extra reach or lingering hitbox to her kit. But the important thing is that you have to focus from the beginning of the fight to the very end. In a lot of sense, it reminds me of Gale, another god tier fight within FromSoft's catalog.
Good hunter. This may sound strange, but have I somehow changed? Moments ago, from some place, perhaps deep within, I sensed a liberation from heavy shackles. Not that I would know. How passing strange.
Before we proceed with the DLC, I took a detour to finish Elise's questline. I was not looking forward to this. Apparently this guy is called the Bloody Crow. The first time I fought him was brutal. I was screaming in pain, in anger. You wanna know how many tries it took me this time? 2? I don't know what happened. I would have swore this guy is the hardest enemy in the entire game, yet I'm not so sure anymore. And this is the end of Elise's quest. We can now purchase her set, which is nice, and a small dagger. I never tried it, but on paper this feels like a terrible idea. Fighting these giant beasts with a small dagger or two? No thank you. Hopping back in the DLC, we can take on a guy we left in the beginning because we needed an item to fight him. What a disappointment. This guy has been built up as one of the key characters, and look at it. It's just a reskin of the Cleric Beast. Same moveset and everything. They could have left out the living failures and focused on making this guy, but nope. Music is sick though. And he does have a second phase that is new, when he loses his legs and crawls around, spewing fire everywhere. It's something, as in the bare minimum in trying to at least justify why this exists in the first place. What a wasted potential. Continuing on, we have the fishing hamlet. Once again, I thought this is the most difficult place in Bloodborne, but it's not so bad. But that's only if you don't go down this well. You can get Maria's weapon down there, sure, it's a pretty sick weapon, but believe me, you don't want to go down there. So how did Maria fight with the weapon if she threw it down the well? You don't want to know. This is another huge area, although I don't think it's that great as the others. You have an underground section which looks like an underground section, and more abandoned buildings filled with these fish-like enemies. It's not bad, it's just not as varied as it could be. Once we get to the Shell People, we're on the right track. FromSoft never misses. They were able to depict the morning after my 20th birthday. How do they do it? Do I even have to tell you that Orphan of Cause is hard? It is the hardest fight that Bloodborne has to offer. In fact, I say that this is not even a fight. It's two lunatics throwing everything they have at each other, hoping that they come out victorious. It's a fast-paced slugfest with two phases, which gets even crazier with lightning strikes. It's mad fun if you're into this kind of craziness. With the DLC done, we can head back to touch this fella. Nightmare of Mensis, our last area. We're getting constantly bombarded by Frenzy thanks to the Brain of Mensis. These guys also drop leeches when they die. A little further, trolls are throwing rocks at you. The game tries its damn hardest to kill you. It's a shame it doesn't succeed. We get the scary spider room. I'm not afraid of spiders, but this freaks me out regardless. Mikulash is a nothing of a boss fight. He talks some shit that alludes to the lore, but not even the helmet he wears is able to hide his blandness. You chase him for a while until he stops, at which point these marionettes are supposed to attack you. Or God forbid Mikulash. He has two attacks. One is the snake hand, the second is a call beyond, which could one-shot you, but it is avoidable. The worst thing is that in order to finish the game, you have to fight this guy. Why did they make him essential? I'll never know. After this we can go lower the Brain of Mensis past these lanterns. This is where the game gives you the only blood rock in the game. its placement is a little too late. At best, there's 3 boss fights remaining, but I guess they didn't want to put this before Mikolash. You humiliate him enough as is. Then we can go meet the Brain of Mensis. Never mind, that's not how you get to him. I'm not gonna be able to show you, but he is very scary. If you happen to have the make a contact emote, please use it near him for about 20 seconds. This elevator is buggy as hell. Picking up where we left off, we meet our old friends, the Shadows of Yharnam. At this point, there really isn't anything new that the game can offer. These peaks have eyes now, so that's something. We can see the woman in white. We saw her in the ROM cutscene. Don't worry about her, she's just looking for her baby. Murgo's Wet Nurse. Cool looking boss with similarly cool looking attacks, but ultimately kinda bland. If you're going for one of the endings, she's the last boss and she's not living up to that. Even if she hits you, at this point you can easily out-heal the damage she deals. With nothing else to do, let's go home.
Good hunter, you have come. Dawn will soon break. This night and this dream will end. Gammon awaits you at the foot of the great tree.
So we could just let Gehrman take our lives and save us from the nightmare, but who will save him then?
Tonight, Gammon joins the hunt.
Gehrman is a great fight. He has so many moves, I don't even know all of them. He managed to kill me on my first try, but I never had trouble with him. It could be that you get so used to fighting hunter type enemies that you just get it by now. Still, the music is amazing, and it's a fast-paced back and forth. Would recommend. Now if you've been injecting umbilical cords, 3 of them at least, you'll be able to resist what happens next. I don't know the Moon Presence's moveset, nor will I pretend that I do. As a last secret boss, it's not bad. The presentation is superb, and he does have that one move that leaves your HP at 1%. FromSoft should utilize this a lot more in their boss design, rather than the one-shot kill moves. It's not perfect here either, as after he does it, he remains stunned for like 5 seconds. I find his melee attacks pretty unpredictable in terms of where I need to dodge, but even with that, it's not a difficult final fight.
Are you cold? Oh, good hunter.
In general, Bloodborne still feels like one of the best games FromSoft has ever done. The slight changes made to the formulas that Demon's Souls and Dark Souls started are significant enough to give Bloodborne a unique identity. And while we can all remember the best parts of Bloodborne, it's important to note that that's not all there is to it. There are some weird decisions that were made, awkward designs, which I don't think can be chalked up to rushed development. They could have improved on certain things like any other developer does, through patches. Seeing that they didn't means that this is the intended experience, and that experience is uneven. Lots of highs and lots of lows, and I guess by the end of it, what decides whether or not you remember more of the positive rather than the negative is all up to how much it made you feel like John Bloodborne.